It was meant to be an ordinary afternoon inside a quiet CVS pharmacy, but fate had other plans. In less than a minute, the calm aisles turned into a stage for a tragedy no one expected. A 68-year-old woman, frail, gentle, picking up her husband's heart medication, was suddenly humiliated, handcuffed, and dragged across the floor as shocked customers stood frozen. No one moved. No one spoke until she lifted her trembling face and whispered 5 words that shattered the officer's entire world. This is not just a story about injustice. It is a story about dignity, courage, and a strength no handcuffs can hold. For Betty Sanders, this afternoon was supposed to be like any other, quiet, simple, predictable. At 68, she lived a life built on routines, and one of those routines was taking care of Harold. For 47 years, she had never once broken a promise to her husband, not even the small ones. So when his heart medication ran low, she slipped into her familiar navy blazer, the one Harold always said made her look like the world's kindest librarian, and headed out. Her reading glasses swung lightly from the silver chain around her neck as she walked into the CVS she'd visited for decades. She knew every aisle, every cashier, even the pharmacist's habit of humming old jazz tunes. Nothing about today felt unusual until she walked back outside. Parked near the entrance, Officer Jake Williams sat in his patrol car with the engine idling. His eyes were fixed on the glowing numbers on a digital dashboard, his arrest count. He needed one more name, one more body to meet the monthly quota. It didn't matter who. When Betty stepped out, squinting to read the small print on Harold's prescription bottle, Jake's attention snapped toward her. To him, she didn't look like someone's wife, someone's caretaker, someone who'd spent her life putting others first. She didn't look like a woman quietly fighting the fear of losing her husband to a weak heart. No. To Jake, she looked like something else entirely, an easy target, elderly, alone, distracted, harmless. He stepped out of the car with a certainty he didn't deserve, the kind born not from truth, but from arrogance. As Betty adjusted her glasses and walked toward her car, Jake made a decision that would change both their lives forever, and everything that was ordinary shattered. The moment Officer Jake Williams approached, the air inside the CVS changed, as if someone had lowered a glass dome over the entire store. Conversations died mid-sentence. The soft beeping of the checkout lanes felt louder than usual. Even the overhead music, a gentle instrumental track, suddenly sounded misplaced, too cheerful for what was coming. Betty Sanders, unaware of the storm about to swallow her, had just tucked the prescription bottle into her purse when Williams stepped directly into her path. "Ma'am," he said sharply, "I need you to remove that bottle from your bag." Betty blinked behind her glasses. "I'm sorry. This is my husband's medicine. I just picked it up." Williams didn't wait for her explanation. He reached into her purse, pulled out the bottle, and held it up like contraband. "I'm placing you under suspicion for drug trafficking." The words slammed into the room like a gunshot. The pharmacist froze. A customer dropped a box of cereal. A mother pulled her little boy closer, shielding him as if danger had a shape, and it stood in front of them, wearing a navy blazer and gentle eyes. That Betty's lips parted, but no sound came out. Drug trafficking? Her? She had never even had a speeding ticket. From behind the counter, Marcus, the store manager, stepped forward, his voice trembling with disbelief. "Officer, there must be a mistake. Mrs. Sanders has been coming here for years. That medication was filled 10 minutes ago. You can check the system." I said, "Step back." Williams barked. Marcus froze. The customers pressed themselves into the aisles, unsure whether to intervene or watch. Most chose the second, not out of cruelty, but out of fear. When chaos bursts into ordinary life, most people shrink into the edges, praying the storm doesn't drag them in. But the storm was already swallowing Betty whole. Williams grabbed her by the arm, too tightly, and spun her around. Her purse swung, hit the counter, and burst open. Small orange bottles rolled across the floor, scattering like frightened marbles. Pills burst from one that had cracked open, skittering across the tile like bits of broken hope. Betty stumbled. Her knees, weakened by years of arthritis, buckled. She reached out to steady herself, but Williams yanked her hands behind her before she could regain balance. Cold metal clamped around her wrists. Handcuffs. A gasp rippled through the store. Someone whispered, "God, not her." Another voice murmured, She's somebody's grandmother. But Williams heard none of it. His jaw was set, his pride inflamed, his need for another arrest blinding him to the truth standing right in front of him. Betty's glasses slipped off her nose, hit the ground, and cracked down the center. She felt the sting of humiliation far more than the sting in her knees. Yet she didn't scream. She didn't plead. Instead, she lifted her chin, not in defiance, but in dignity. The kind of quiet strength that comes from decades of surviving grief, responsibility, and the slow heartbreak of watching a loved one's health fade. Please, Marcus tried again, stepping closer. Let me show you the records. She paid. She didn't steal anything. Williams pointed a finger at him. One more word, and you'll be obstructing an investigation. Phones were out now. Recording. Zooming in on every trembling breath from Betty, every heavy-handed shove from the officer. The world loves a spectacle, even when its heart breaks watching one. Walk, Williams ordered, pushing her toward the exit. Her feet slipped on the scattered pills. She wobbled. A customer reached out instinctively to steady her, but pulled their hand back at the last second, unsure whether touching her would also pull them into trouble. Betty walked anyway. Each step was a battle, not just against the pain in her joints or the weight of the handcuffs, but against the shame. Shame that wrapped around her like a cold wind, whispering that everyone was watching her fall at the door. She paused just for a moment, long enough for Williams to shove her harder. Her shoulder hit the metal frame. She winced. Still, she didn't cry. Outside, the sun lit the parking lot with an indifferent brightness. It didn't care that her dignity was being peeled away layer by layer. Cars drove past. People stared. Williams opened the patrol car door and practically pushed her inside. Her head brushed the top of the frame, and she bit her lip at the sting. Through the window, she looked back at the crowd. Dozens of eyes staring at her, horrified, silent, helpless. Her humiliation was complete, but her spirit wasn't broken, because behind those trembling eyes, beneath the pain and confusion, there was something else, that a calm, that a truth, that a hidden certainty she had not yet spoken, that a truth that would blow this entire case wide open. Inside the patrol car, the world felt small. Tight air, closed doors, the faint smell of dust, and old vinyl seats. Officer Jake Williams settled into the driver's seat with the smug confidence of a man who believed he had just secured another easy arrest. He typed rapidly on the dashboard-mounted computer, his fingers dancing with the rhythm of arrogance. Female. Caucasian. Approximately 68. Suspected possession with intent to distribute. Another box to check. Another stat for the month. Another story to brag about later. Behind him, in the caged back seat, Betty Sanders sat motionless. Her wrists were still cuffed, but her breathing had steadied. The hurtful whispers from the crowd, the humiliation, the pain in her knees. She carried all of it with the steady weight of someone who had survived worse storms than this. Williams didn't bother looking back at her. He didn't see her straighten. He didn't see her gather her breath. He didn't see the shift in her expression, from shock to clarity. But he heard her voice, soft, calm, controlled. "Officer," she said gently. He didn't turn around. "Save it, ma'am." Then she said the 5 words that split the afternoon open. "I am the judge." Silence swallowed the car. For a moment, everything stopped. The typing, the engine's low hum, even the world outside the windows. Williams froze, fingers hovering above the keys. His heartbeat seemed to leap into his throat. Then he laughed out a short, nervous laugh. "Ma'am, you think pretending to be someone important is going to help you?" he muttered. "You can get another charge for that." But something in her tone, the certainty, the steadiness, lingered in his mind like a whisper of dread. Betty didn't argue. She didn't plead. She simply repeated, with the quiet power of truth, "Run my name." Those 3 words were heavier than the badge on his chest. Williams swallowed, irritation creeping in. "Fine. But lying isn't helping." He typed her name into the system. Sanders, Elizabeth, and he pressed entered. A loading bar appeared. Then pages of information began to fill the screen. The first line hit him like a punch. Federal judge, United States District Court, 23 years on the bench. His face drained of color. He scrolled, hoping, praying, that he had misread something, but the truth only grew sharper. Specialization, police misconduct cases, evaluated over 3,000 law enforcement incidents. Authored landmark rulings on abuse of authority, Senate confirmed. The world tilted beneath him. No, no, this can't, he whispered, reading the words again and again, as if they might change. But facts don't bend for fear. Betty watched him from the back seat, her expression unreadable, not vengeful, not triumphant, just deeply disappointed. Almost sad. William's breath quickened. You're Judge Sanders? The Judge Sanders? She didn't answer with anger. She simply nodded. The weight of that nod crushed every ounce of his confidence. His throat tightened. His hands trembled on the keyboard. The badge on his chest suddenly felt like a chain pulling him underwater. He had handcuffed a federal judge, humiliated her, dragged her across the floor, accused her, without cause, of drug trafficking. And now he understood the enormity of what he had done. His career didn't just crack. IT shattered. Outside the car, people were gathering. Phones were still recording, but now their voices were louder. Angry, demanding answers. Videos uploaded seconds earlier were already racing across the internet. Hashtag Justice for Betty rising like a storm cloud. Inside the store, Marcus was pulling security footage, shaking with fear and fury, and sending it directly to the police oversight board. The footage showed everything. Betty's calm, her payment receipt, the moment Williams grabbed her without cause, the shove, the fall, the spilled pills. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't an accident. It was abuse. And the world was starting to see it. Within minutes, news alerts erupted. Reporters rushed to the scene. One reporter, Sarah Brown, known for never backing down from corruption, received a message from a CVS employee. You need to see what just happened here. A cop arrested a federal judge. For no reason. Sarah didn't wait. She dug into the officer's history, and what she discovered spread like wildfire. Multiple complaints, misconduct reports buried, suspensions erased, unexplained quota pushes, arrests that didn't hold up in court. People too scared to speak, people who tried and were ignored. Williams hadn't just arrested the wrong woman. He had just exposed everything he'd been hiding behind. Every decision he made out of laziness, every time he blamed suspicious behavior, every moment he used authority like a weapon, lay bare before the public. Sarah's reports collected testimonies from other victims, people who had been dismissed, silenced, or brushed aside. Betty's arrest became the spark that lit a fire across the city, a fire that would not go out quietly. In the patrol car, Williams was unraveling. His hands shook. His breathing was shallow. He looked in the rearview mirror at Betty and saw not a fragile woman, but the truth, that a woman of justice, a woman of courage, that a woman he had wronged in a way he could never undo. Judge Sanders, he stammered, voice cracking. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't. She cut him off gently. You didn't ask. Those 3 words carried a lifetime of weight. That he closed his eyes, knowing his badge, the thing he once wore with pride, meant nothing now. Not after this. On the sidewalks, people began chanting. Phones kept rolling. The internet kept burning. His world, the world he had built on shortcuts, ego, and unchecked power, was collapsing in real time. Faster than he could think. Faster than he could breathe. Betty looked out the window, watching the crowd gather, her eyes calm. This wasn't just about her. This was about every person who never got the chance to say those 5 words. Every person who had been dismissed, belittled, or broken by the same system. Her truth wasn't just a revelation. It was a reckoning. And the reckoning had only just begun. The truth did not travel quietly. It exploded. Within hours, the video of Betty's arrest spread across Atlanta like wildfire. Across phones, televisions, radios, every social feed possible. It wasn't just the shocking moment of the handcuffs. It wasn't even the gasp when she said, "I am the judge." It was everything behind it. Every injustice the city had ignored for far too long. By nightfall, the Atlanta Police Department was in full panic mode. Inside the precinct, Captain Richard Morris, a man who had spent his career polishing the department's image, paced back and forth, barking orders that reeked of desperation. Shut down the internal reports. Lock the footage in the secure archive. No one talks to press unless it goes through me. He wasn't trying to find the truth. He was trying to bury it. Morris had been covering misconduct for years, smoothing reputations, hiding complaints, and protecting officers who made the department look productive. And Jake Williams had been his best performer. High arrest numbers, always available, always willing to go the extra mile, if it meant meeting quotas. Now that very officer had detonated a public relations bomb in the center of Atlanta. Across the city, the police union scrambled to shield Williams. They assigned him a lawyer, issued statements calling Betty's claims misinterpretations, and argued his arrest was a standard procedure misunderstood by a crowd untrained in law enforcement protocols. But the union couldn't stop what was coming. While chaos erupted in the city, Betty Sanders returned home shaken, bruised, but quiet. Her neighbors hovered on their porches, unsure whether to approach her or give her space. Reporters gathered in clusters across the street, hoping she would speak. She didn't. She walked inside her home with Harold's medicine still in her purse and shut the door behind her. But inside, her sanctuary no longer felt safe. That night, a black SUV idled outside her driveway. Then another. Strangers sat inside, silhouettes lit by glowing dashboards. Watching. The next morning, she received the first threat. One sentence typed from an untraceable number. Drop the accusations, or else. Then came the hacking. Her credit cards declined. Her bank flagged suspicious activity. Her email flooded with warnings and locked accounts. She knew exactly who was doing it. This was the system's old strategy: discredit, distract, destroy. For the first time in years, Betty felt something unfamiliar: fear. Not for herself, but for Harold. He had been quiet since she came home. Too quiet. He moved slower, breathed heavier, held her hand as if afraid she might disappear. One evening, as she heated soup on the stove, she heard a sound she'd never forget: the thud of a body hitting the floor. "Harold?" she whispered, rushing to him. But he wasn't responding. His hand clutched his chest. His breathing was sharp, ragged, desperate. "Stay with me," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "Stay, Harold. Please." The paramedics arrived within minutes, but the damage had already been done. Stress had cracked open the fragile compartments of his heart, the very thing she'd been trying to protect. When she went to CVS that afternoon, as they wheeled him away, one paramedic murmured, "Ma'am, it's a heart attack. We'll do everything we can." For the first time since the arrest, Betty's strength wavered. She felt small. She felt tired. She felt outnumbered. And in the quiet hospital hallway, surrounded by machines and the hollow echo of fear, she wondered if it was all too much, if fighting this war was worth losing the person she loved most. But fate wasn't done with her. The next morning, something extraordinary happened. Judge Rivera from Tennessee called. Then Judge Thompson from Chicago. Then 4 lawyers she had mentored years ago. Then 3 reporters. Then victims whose stories had been buried. Men and women who had lost jobs, health, and dignity to officers just like Williams. Emails poured in. Voice messages stacked up. Her phone buzzed nonstop with words she never expected to hear. "We stand with you. You're not alone. We want to help. We believe you." People she'd never met came forward. Young attorneys, civil rights advocates, retired officers whose conscience wouldn't stay silent. What had begun as an attempt to humiliate her had turned into a movement bigger than Betty, bigger than Williams, bigger than Atlanta. And then came the documents. An anonymous detective slid an envelope under her door. Inside were files, dozens of them. Reports dating back 11 years, all stamped with the same officer's name, Jake Williams. Betty sat at her dining table, her hands trembling as she opened each file. Every report had the same pattern: elderly suspects, most living alone, most black, most accused of prescription abuse. Most charges later dropped, and all without evidence. But the worst blow, the document that turned her breath into ice, was not a report. It was an audio file, a recorded conversation between Williams and his partner. The voices were unmistakable. First officer: "Old folks don't fight back. Especially the black ones." Williams laughed. "Yeah, they always fold under pressure. Easy stats." Betty pressed pause. For a moment, she sat in heavy, suffocating silence. Her humiliation had never been personal. It had been planned, targeted, practiced. She felt the anger rise, not hot and wild, but deep, cold, and resolute. The kind of anger born not from rage, but from truth. The kind the world cannot ignore. Sarah Brown, the reporter who had already been following Betty's case, received a copy of the recording an hour later. And when she played it on the evening news, the country erupted. Protests grew. Demands amplified. Editorials were written. Legal analysts called it the biggest police scandal in over a decade. Betty's arrest had opened a wound the city had tried to stitch shut for years, now torn wide in front of the nation. And suddenly, this was no longer Atlanta's problem. It was America's. Then, late one night, a fleet of black SUVs rolled into the Atlanta Police Department. Agents stepped out, jackets marked with 3 letters that carried more weight than any badge in the building. FBI. Captain Morris tried to block them. "Gentlemen, you can't just walk in here." An agent held up a warrant. Federal investigation. Authorities superseding local jurisdiction. The war Betty never asked for had now reached its final battlefield, and she wasn't fighting alone anymore. 6 months later, the sun hung gently over Atlanta, warm and unhurried, as if the city itself had finally exhaled after a long-held breath. The same CVS sat on the corner, the same glass doors, the same red signage, the same automatic chime when customers stepped inside. But everything else had changed. When Betty Sanders pulled into the parking lot, her hands steady on the steering wheel, she wasn't the same woman who had once been dragged out of those doors, humiliated and handcuffed. She was healed in places no one could see, stronger in ways she never expected to be. And yet, still the same dignified soul who had walked in that day with nothing but love for her husband and a simple promise to keep. Harold sat beside her now, healthier, breathing easier, a soft smile tugging at the corners of his lips. He squeezed her hand gently. "I'll be right here," he said. She smiled back. "I know." When Betty stepped inside the CVS, the world didn't go silent with shock this time. Instead, it came alive with warmth. "Good afternoon, Judge Sanders," the pharmacist said, standing straighter with respect. "Welcome back, ma'am," a cashier added with a soft, grateful nod. Even customers turned, recognizing her face from the news, from the hearings, from the quiet revolution she never intended to lead but had carried with unwavering grace. There were no suspicious glances, no whispers, no fear, only dignity, the very thing that had once been stripped from her. She walked the aisle calmly, her navy blazer brushing softly against her sides, her reading glasses hanging from the familiar silver chain. This wasn't a victory lap. It wasn't triumph. It was healing, the quiet, humble kind that settles deep in the bones. Outside, justice had already run its course. Officer Jake Williams now sat in a federal prison, convicted of civil rights violations, stripped of his badge, his freedom, and the arrogance that once defined him. His partner, Officer Rodriguez, had been convicted for conspiracy, for covering up misconduct and enabling it. Captain Morris, the man who spent years burying the sins of others, had been forced into retirement under investigation, his reputation stained by the truth he tried so desperately to hide. And the Atlanta Police Department, shaken to its core, rewrote its entire arrest policy. Mandatory de-escalation training, body cameras required, NO quotas, independent review boards. A new system, built not on fear, but on accountability. Betty didn't do any of it for revenge. She did it because silence helps no one. Because fear cannot be allowed to win. Because the truth, once spoken, can move mountains. As she picked up Harold's medication, the same bottle, the same prescription, the same errand that once turned her life upside down, she felt, for the first time in months, at peace. When she stepped outside, Harold rolled down the car window and grinned. "You took long enough. I was starting to miss you." She laughed softly. "They're just being kind. It feels strange." "No," Harold said. "It feels right." She slid into the passenger seat, her hand finding his. The world outside moved as usual. Cars passing, leaves rustling, a distant siren somewhere far away. But inside their car, everything felt safe. Whole, untouched by the cruelty of 6 months prior. Betty won. Not because she was powerful, not because she was feared, but because she refused to be silent when silence was easier. Because dignity, once broken, can rebuild itself stronger than before. Because courage often whispers, not roars. Sometimes, justice wears reading glasses. Sometimes, courage comes from the quietest voice in the room. And sometimes, the person everyone underestimates becomes the one who changes everything.